And our goal as a group of companies through Weaver Construction, Building God's Way, our team at the Genesis Project is to help plant, lead, revitalize, and equip the Church of Jesus Christ to make a significant dent in the darkness and hopelessness that exists in your community, in your world. And so a lot of times I get asked the question, what is it that we do at the Genesis Project in a partnership with Weaver and Building God's Way? Our heart as a group is to plant and revitalize churches. We are church planters at heart, but one of the things we've realized is this, and I was just sharing this with some pastors in the room. We can never plant enough churches, raise enough money, raise up enough young leaders to turn the tide of what's happening in America today. We have to revitalize churches. We have to go into churches that are in historic decline and figure out ways to make them vibrant and alive again. And I know that we have a lot of pastors in the room today that are going about the hard work of leading change. How many of you know that change is one of the hardest things you're ever going to lead people through, because all of us are built with a resistance to change. Our church is just over 10 years old, and when we moved into our first permanent facility, I was amazed at in just 5 years how many golden calves we had built at the Genesis Project that people were ready to die for. How many of you know what I mean when it's golden calves? Well, we've always done it this way. Like, people even got attached to the broken ways we were doing things because we didn't have any other choice in doing it. And what our hopes are is to be able to not just serve you, but to serve through you as a church. In the 1980s, the planning commissions all over the United States of America came across this novel idea that they were going to build neighborhoods and communities, subdivisions around cul-de-sacs. Anybody in here ever live? Maybe you live now in a cul-de-sac. I grew up on a cul-de-sac. And the thinking of cul-de-sac by city planners was this, is that cul-de-sacs will be safer places for kids to play, safer places for communities to gather, for kids to go out and play together with one another. Have you realized they don't build cul-de-sacs anymore? The reason why is because there was a study done by the American Department of Transportation in 1998 that told us that cul-de-sacs were actually the most dangerous roads in America. Why? Because more people get hurt by cars backing up than cars moving forward. A lot of times as churches, we focus on trying to build cul-de-sacs. We get so inwardly focused on our ministry, our vision, our people, our committees. How many of you in here have ever wrestled with committees at a church, right? Want to pull your hair out. That's what happened to all of my hair. That we forget that the church, each individual church, is meant to be a part of a superhighway that is the body of Jesus Christ. Because when we're moving forward, we're a force to be reckoned with. When we're backing up and trying to navigate dead-end roads, we become dangerous and we hurt one another. And so the Genesis Project exists in a partnership with Weaver Construction in Building God's Way, because our heart is to equip pastors and leaders in churches to be missional. The last thing in the world we want to do is inspire you to build a building that leaves nothing left over for mission, that leaves you with a mortgage where you have no capacity left to dream because you're just trying to figure out how to pay that mortgage every month, that leaves you in a place where your days are consumed with a building and not the mission that we have been placed on. And so BGW really exists as what we hope can be a one-stop shop for you in the process of growth and mission and vision in your community, because there's a value in having friends. How many of you know that? There's a value in knowing people who know people who do things. And one of the things that we have been able to do through BGW is working with oftentimes 300 to 400 churches a year. Those aren't necessarily buildings that we're building, but in some capacity, we're able to work with a large group of churches across all 50 states in the United States. And in doing that, we're able to utilize the resources of a large organization and to pass down those relationships and also savings. Any pastors in here say amen to savings, right? I've never yet met a pastor or a church that says we have too much money, we don't know what to do with it. Because guess what they didn't teach us in seminary? The ministry costs money, right? Don't you hate that? You know, the more hurting people you invite into your church, the more need you're going to have for a benevolence ministry. You know, the more people you reach that need recovery, that they're going to demand more of your church than they're going to give to your church for those first couple of years. Ministry costs money. Being an embedded church costs money. And so how do we have this conversation? So two things that we're really passionate about doing at Genesis Project and BGW and Weaver Construction is being able to take the relationships we have and offer them to you as churches with no strings attached. So everything I'm getting ready to share with you right now is accessible to you. We understand that there are some of you here that maybe building a building is 5, 6, 7 years out. I promise you, Dave Hershey, sitting over here, is willing to go on that journey with you for the next 6 or 7 years. What I hope you learned today in just a couple hours that we've spent sitting together is we are not good salesmen. And we take that as a compliment, right? We're not here to sell you anything. We're here because we believe in the mission and the vision that God has given you as a church. So the first team of partners that we have, that we call our stable of experts, is for-profit businesses. What we have found is a lot of times projects that seem insurmountable for churches, sometimes a part of the answer, and hear me, this isn't a get rich quick, this isn't, and all of a sudden we're going to have so much money and we're going to all be millionaires, and this is just sometimes utilization that you can introduce into your existing property in building that really capitalizes on, number one, your kingdom impact in your community, and number two, the economic bottom line of where you're at and where you're going. And so we always want to see that double impact. And so we have partners, childcare. I would love to talk to you about childcare. I think all of us would say, Dave, that this is a model we believe in more than anything else listed here. So if you're taking notes, underline that childcare piece. The reason we believe in childcare so much is because it overlaps 100% with the mission and vision and values of a church that is looking to speak the gospel and disciple the next generation of kingdom shakers that are coming into our world. You know that more and more families today, close to 80% of the young families in your community right here in Cleveland, are two-income families. Both mom and dad have to work. It's just a reality in the world that we live in today, which means that the greatest felt need of that family is a place to drop their kids off. And at 6 o'clock every morning, parents are dropping their kids off, picking them up at 5 or 6 o'clock in the afternoon, and they are entrusting the care and the education of their children pre-kindergarten to somebody 50 hours a week, which is more time than mom and dad will ever spend with them throughout the school year. How many of you would agree that's an awesome opportunity for churches? See, on the opposite end of crisis, it's always opportunity. So we have and let me give you this disclaimer. We talk to churches and pastors all the time that say, our church tried a daycare. It was terrible. We had people running it that we didn't like. They didn't like us. We didn't like them. There was gossip. There was drama. We lost money. Our building got hammered. We never got anything out of it. It was just a mess, and we shut it down, and it's the best thing we ever did. Anybody have that story in here with daycare? Awesome. You guys are one of the first groups in the entire nation that no one has had that. What we have realized is this. Pastors don't know the first thing about running child care centers. Amen. I apologize to our children's pastor at our church all the time because when she is doing ministry at our church, so am I. Like hers is the one ministry that I just never drop in on and visit because when she's busy, I'm busy. when she's doing stuff, I'm doing stuff. And I mean, if you stuck me in kids' church at our church with 250 kids next weekend, I promise you I wouldn't know what to do. And childcare is even more complicated than that. And so we have forged a partnership with the second largest childcare organization in the nation. It is a for-profit childcare business, which means they are in the business of running profitable centers. It's called Learning Care Group. You may not recognize that name, but do you recognize La Petite Academy? Do you recognize Montessori Academy? They actually have 8 different brands that they open in conjunction with Weaver Construction and Building God's Way. Learning Care Group has actually established an 8th brand called Pathways Learning Academy that is a brand specifically built to move into churches. It has a STEAM curriculum. You know what that is: science, technology, engineering, arts, and math, right? Which is what parents want today. One of the cool things about the Pathway Learning Academy is this: Learning Care Group is going to come into your church, into your space. They're going to deal with licensure. They're going to deal with marketing. They're going to deal with filling up your quotas in your classrooms. They're going to deal with hiring and firing. Amen to that, right? They're going to deal with everything that needs to be dealt with day to day. The only thing you're bringing to the table as a church is your facility. That by and large, your kids' ministry is sitting empty and unused, more than likely, Monday through Friday from 6 a.m. to 6 p.m. And you have a 60% ownership in that building or in that business by allowing this childcare to come in and function inside. The second thing we're really passionate about this Pathways Academy model is one of the first staff, the only position that the church has the responsibility to hire at the beginning is somebody to oversee the spiritual care and discipleship of those kids, which means that in the process, you are getting a full-time children's pastor that you don't have to pay for out of your general budget, because it's being paid for by the Learning Academy that functions inside of your church. And that individual gets to take an hour and a half every day with kids around all of this other curriculum and teach the Bible, the Word of God, disciple kids. With these that we have seen open, our goal is inside of 5 years to see these centers giving anywhere from $250,000 to $500,000 a year in profit back to the church as passive income. Sounds awesome, right? It is never like a done deal. A lot of times, Learning Care Group will come in and look at a specific facility, look at an address and say, it's just not a good fit. Which, by the way, sometimes a no is just as valuable as a yes moving forward. Last thing you want to do is charge down a path that's not feasible for you. So one of the things that we're going to offer you today is an opportunity to connect and to get a yes or no from all of our partners, absolutely free with no strings attached. We want to turn the lights on for you to understand, is this a process? I'll tell you that when it comes to Learning Care Group, probably about 1 out of every 20 churches we work with, it's a good fit. But when it's a good fit, it's an awesome fit. So we also have mixed-use retail. A lot of times we have churches that maybe have 25 acres, and you meet with Dave and figure out, gosh, we're only ever going to develop 15 of these acres. What are we going to do with the extra 10? Sometimes we can bring in retail partners that, again, can do a land lease and help you create passive income coming back. We have senior care groups. Senior care is a little bit weird because it can't share the same building with you. It requires an independent structure. It's a good business model. It's a good ministry model to an underserved part of our community, but a lot of times really expensive hospitality. So a lot of times we do event space, help churches rent out their space when they're not using it. If we're already putting technology in the building and doing a lot of awesome things, why not open it up for your community to pay you to come in and be a part of what you're doing? And then also on here we have a coffee group that we work with. The reason I put coffee ministry on there is because coffee, no one's going to get rich off of coffee if your last name's not Starbucks. Like, I promise you that. It's a great ministry. We run coffee shops at all of our campuses of the Genesis Project. They don't generate a whole lot of revenue for us, but guess what? I don't have to hire a secretary or receptionist at any of my campuses because I have 3 or 4 baristas that are working from 6 a.m. to 8 p.m. every day. They know my schedule. They can let me know when somebody shows up and needs a pastor to pray with them. You will never find a locked door at our church because we run a bounty shop. So what happens is what it pays back into the church isn't always cash. Sometimes it's just ministry that we don't have to pay for and create because the business is creating that momentum. And so the 2 things we want to look for, number 1 is this kingdom impact. We want to increase people flow. Remember we talked about earlier today that people aren't walking by your church and saying, I should go check that out? What happens when you have a child care center in your church where you have 200 kids that are being dropped off by mom and dad every morning at 6 a.m. and picked up every evening at 6 p.m.? You have 2 touch points with a family in your community that you may never be able to touch in any other way. You want to know the love language of every mom and dad going to work on a Monday morning, dropping their kids off at 6 at your building? Coffee. And it's cheap. So what happens when your church says, we're going to build a ministry around just smiling and receiving mom and dad out in the parking lot and giving them a free cup of coffee from our church? We may never get the opportunity in that pickup line to preach the gospel and to walk them down the Roman road to salvation. But what if we could elicit this question? Who are those people at that church? And why do they care about me, my kids, and my family so much? The moment they ask that question of you, you get to tell them about Jesus. Because how many know we are only loving because we've been loved, right? That's the answer to the question. So we want to increase people flow. We want to build buildings that get used, right, Ron? We want to see buildings that are full. We want to put, and Don always hates it when I say this, but I say it all the time anyway. We want to put carpet in your buildings that gets worn out where you have to replace it, right? We want to see a building that when people drive by your church on a Tuesday morning, they're like, why are there always people at that building? So the first thing we want to do is see a kingdom impact of people flow. And the second thing we want to see is we want to increase cash flow to the church. Not every model we have is going to pay back tens of thousands of dollars a month. But what would happen if we could dream strategically over your community and your facility? And what if we could just say, hey, let's generate an extra $2,000 a month, which sounds really meager, right? But what could you do with $2,000 a month in your local missions fund? What kind of damage could you do if you had an extra $2,000 in your benevolence fund, right? So we're not talking about a get-rich-quick ideology. The last thing in the world we would ever want you to do is to take out a mortgage that you can't afford as a church because you're hoping that a business is going to pay for it on the back end. That's not good stewardship. But what's good stewardship is saying, how do we utilize our building so we can do more, serve more, be more in our community and become what God has called us to do? So how do we reduce overhead costs, investing more resources into the mission of our church moving forward? So what's the kingdom impact? Is it a feasible business model? And I'm going to talk to you about this process, but those are 2 things that, again, we just want to give you as a free resource. Turn the lights on. We want to give you access to all of our strategic partners and ask the question, what if? You could get a yes from our daycare partner. And they would say, we would love to partner with you. That doesn't mean you ever have to do anything with that. But at least when you're going through the process of dreaming, you understand, man, there's people interested in our property. What can we do with that? Okay. The second group, here's one. This is Pathways Learning Academy that these guys built in Northview Church in Indiana. Just a beautiful, top-of-the-line center. So these Pathway Learning Academies are just really, really cool. And we are blessed through building God's way in our network of builders to have this partnership with such a great group of people that believe in taking care of kids. The second group of partners we have are our church services partners. Has anybody in here like me as a poor pastor just trying to make things happen, like gone out and looked at like, what does it cost for us to do a capital campaign? Anybody ever shopped a capital campaign? Do you ever come back from that process and think, good Lord, we would be lucky just to raise that amount. I might do a capital campaign and still owe that dude $20,000 at the end of the day. Did you know a typical capital campaign can cost the church anywhere from $60,000 to $100,000? Am I off base?
No, you're right.
Yeah, they're expensive, and it's nuts, right? But we understand that it makes sense to bring in partners. So here's what we've done with all of our church partners, which this is my favorite part of what I get to do, is we get to call up these national church partners and say, hey, this is Matt from Building God's Way. We're working with 300 to 400 churches every year, and we would love to introduce our churches to you. But listen, we need you to come down on your price a lot. We need you to do better for the churches we're working with. We use the volume that comes through BGW in order to beat up some of these guys on prices, which how many of you think that's fun? It's my favorite thing when I go on a missions trip, like put me in a marketplace where I can haggle for things. It's a blast, right? My wife gets humiliated by me, but I get to do that for you. And so we've gone to capital campaign firms like Generous. You can shop, go to their website right now, and you'll see like big prices. But we've struck a deal with Generous for any BGW church that's going, regardless of the amount of money that you are looking to borrow, all in, no added cost for travel, no added cost for this material or that, all in $35,000 for any BGW church. And it just stands up to what's going on in the marketplace around us. We have guys who do strategic planning, corporate guys who work in Fortune 100, Fortune 500 companies. Sometimes churches just need a very clear strategic path moving forward. There's tools out there that oftentimes are like 6 figures in that world. We're able to get a cost for a strategic plan sometimes as low for churches as $5,000 or $6,000, where professionals can come in and walk you step by step through mission, vision, values. What are our next steps and pathways moving forward? Pastoral care. It's a really important thing for us, man. We know that healthy churches are birthed out of healthy pastors, and it never happens different. If you are not healthy today, reach out for help. And this is just something almost all the time we just want to give away to pastors. We want to take care of you, take care of your spouse, take care of men. Your ministry depends on you. We know that's a heavy weight, and so if we can care for you in any way, it would be our honor to do that. Marketing and design. Jason Minarchuk is a part of our team. He's won multiple awards in marketing, design, messaging space for a lot of big companies. And he's taken what he's learned in those big companies and figured out how to bring those to churches. We go to a lot of churches and we hear incredible mission, vision, and values. We encounter world-class preaching from pulpits on Sunday morning, and then we go to your website and it doesn't reflect anything that's going on inside of your church. Some of you are putting your head down like, don't look at our website. Right? Are we utilizing social media? I know some of us in here, I'm 42 years old and I got left behind on the social media bandwagon. When I started college, we didn't have internet yet. That's how fast the world has changed. I have a hard time keeping up with Instagram, right? I don't think to take out a picture in my phone to take a picture of the broccoli I'm eating at night, but sometimes we can help you with that messaging to share with your community. Did you know that the average first-time visitor for your church today in 2019 will spend an hour with you online before they'll ever walk through your doors? And typically that hour is comprised of one 60-second to 90-second touch points. So they're going to click on you 20 to 30 times before they're going to show up and shake your hand. What story is your social media presence telling? What story is your website telling? We've got experts that want to help you unpack that. I met with Jason the other day. We actually got a call from a financing firm, which for me was pretty cool because I'm a pastor and I don't know what I'm doing. So I just get to show up and be a guy in the room. And it was really cool because this financing firm hired Jason to come in and take a look at the website and their branding and their logo. And the first thing Jason did, he said, man, you guys deal with financing and bookkeeping. And when I went to your website, everything is branded red. A finance company shouldn't have a red logo. How many of you agree with that? I don't think that way, but Jason's like, so here's like, let's adopt the color green. Like, that's a good color for your And so a lot of times to have an outside perspective, and listen to me, it's not that we're dumb as pastors, we just weren't taught this way. I didn't go to school to get an MBA like Jason did, but what I've realized is all truth is God's truth. Let that statement sink into you a little. If it's true, it's God's. Right? All truth is God's truth. And so let's take the truth that's working in the world and help you get out there in your community. We were just at a United Methodist church in Florida a month ago. Jason?
I think it's 2 now.
2 months ago. The strength of that church was the passion and the preaching and the visionary capability of that senior pastor. And what's funny is we left that church, and I was trying to explain to our team just how dynamic Pastor Kevin was. And I was like, let me show him to you. And I went on YouTube, couldn't find anything. Went on Facebook, couldn't find anything. Went on Instagram, I couldn't find any way to show off the strength of this church. And we were able to go back to the church and say, you are missing your strength. We have got to get this pastor on video. We've got to get him on messaging. We've got to get him out because he's the strength of your community. It's part of what happens when we engage with these services. We have real estate services, lending services, which you're going to hear more about today, supply. We buy a lot of carpet at BGW. We buy a lot of chairs. We tried to guess at it yesterday, Don. We buy tens of thousands of chairs every year, right? It never ceases to amaze me how stinking expensive church chairs are. Anybody ever tried to shop church chairs? Like, where's the Walmart for church chairs, right? I want to buy these. BGW. Don, what would you say in supply revenue every year?
You know, this is embarrassing. I'm the president of this board, and I have no idea.
Millions.
Yes, millions.
Multiple millions, right? So what happens is when it comes to the carpet we're standing on, we have a great relationship with Shaw because we buy a ton of carpet. Don't buy it at their prices, buy it at our prices, which, by the way, Cornerstone Supply is a nonprofit company, which means we are passing those savings dollar for dollar directly back to your church. So if you're here today and like, we might build a building in 6 years, man, we could definitely use carpet right now. You need to call Dave and say, hey, I need access to supply. And you get them right to this access. Let's stand together as the church and make the marketplace a more friendly place for all of us standing together. Does that make sense? We're using bulk mentality in order to pass the savings down onto you for all of these services. So here's what we want you to hear, and then we're going to move forward with our other presenters this afternoon. But we all are wearing different shirts today. But here's what we want you to hear. This is a one-team approach. Dave and I are on the same team. Ron's going to come up, we're on the same team. We are all working together for you on behalf of your church. So if you're here today and maybe you're resounding with something that I've shared and I've said, and you have a question, that is a question that we're going to work together as a team. We are not separate entities, but we're one team working on behalf of you and the church moving forward. So you have this collective team. I love Hebrews chapter 12. Therefore, we are surrounded by such a great cloud of witnesses. So let us throw off every sin that so easily entangles us and run with perseverance this race marked out for us, fixing our eyes on Jesus, the author and perfecter of our faith. We want to be a small part of this crowd around you that's just cheering you on. And so today we hope you don't see a construction company, an architecture company, and then there was that weird pastor dude who confessed he wanted to kill people this morning a little bit earlier, and maybe there was a design guy over here. It's a one-team approach. Because what I know is this. When we went into a building campaign 6 years ago, I didn't have time, the bandwidth or the resources sitting in Ogden, Utah, to put this team around myself. And so we paid a lot for some stuff we didn't need to. We made a lot of mistakes, and we want to help you with a one-team approach moving forward. So what are your next steps? Your journey starts with Dave, the team at Weaver Construction here in Ohio. Jason and I have to go back home to our families and to our churches and to our communities We want to be available to you, and we will be. We're going to talk about that here in a minute. These guys are the boots on the ground. If you could use my help, your first phone call needs to be to Dave. If you want to talk a little bit more about a charrette process and design, your first phone call needs to be to Dave. The beauty of the BGW network is that we have a team that knows Ohio. You have, Ron, how long have you been doing construction in Ohio?
36 years.
36 years, right? So we have this team here that's available. And I promise you, listen to me, if you call Dave and say, Dave, I need you to come walk through our building. We want to tell you what's going on. He's going to show up at your building, and you're not going to get a bill in the mail for his time. All the pastors say amen to that, right?
Amen.
Let me tell you something about our church. We've had a lawyer at the Genesis Project on retainer for the last 8 years, and I threaten every one of our staff pastors every time that I can. I swear to you, if you call that lawyer, I will fire you. Why? Because you make a phone call to the lawyer, and what's going to happen? You're going to get billed, and it's ridiculous, right? So I'm joking there, but here's the deal. This is no strings attached. Dave is here to serve you. If you are looking at buying a property that you want to remodel, have Dave walk through that building with you, right? If you want to know what walls are load-bearing or not, don't trust some old guy in your church that knocks on the wall and says, I think we can take that out. You're laughing because you know that dude, right? Like, I'm pretty sure this one's not holding up the roof. Let's take it out. You've got pros that want to work for you. Is that a fair invitation, Dave? He will come to you. You're going to walk through, and then he's going to be able to help you have access to this whole team, because we understand that today this is like trying to get a drink from a fire hose, okay? So if you're here today and you would say, man, we just need chairs and we need access to supply, call Dave. Or, man, we want to start this whole process. We're ready to go into a charrette and move and go. Get a hold of this guy, okay? And I promise you, as a pastor, this dude loves the church and he loves Jesus. And he's going to take good care of you. So, are you blushing yet?
Nope.
No, good. Okay, awesome. So next steps. Where do you go from here? The first one is this. We want to set up a 30-minute story call with you. So that's a video phone call. One of the cool things is this. You and I can make a really personal and really cool connection over a video phone call. So that's something where actually you're going to get 3 of us on that phone call. Myself, Jason Minarchuk in the back, and Dave, or one of the guys from Weaver Construction. And for 30 minutes, we want to hear your story. We want to hear where God's taking you, where you have been, because there's something that happens, right? Pastor, when I hear your story of taking over a ministry 13 years ago for a pastor who had been there, how many years? 45 years. Like the first thing, I just want to hug you, right? Like that's my first response, because we talked about it in the beginning today. There's power in story. Listen, there's a lot of companies out there that want you to know their story. We want to know your story. We want to listen to you. So for 30 minutes, we just want to listen. Here's what's going to happen. We're actually going to put together a narrative of your story, because your story is important. Then we're going to couple that narrative that we write out about the story and the history of your church with a retail professional demographic study of your property. We're going to put those 2 things together, the science and the art, the story and the X's and O's. And we're going to send that out to all of our strategic partners. You don't have to do it. The Learning Care Group is going to look at it, and they're going to give you a recommendation, a yes, no, or a not yet. We call it a green light, go, red light, don't go, yellow light. Let's move forward with some caution. Here are some things we need to check off the list. You're going to have people looking at your website. You're going to have our partners looking at your ministry models. We're going to hear where you feel like you're stuck and you can move forward. And out of all of the information we get back from our strategic partners, we're going to bring back to you, number 1, that demographic report is yours. You're going to own it. It's free, which you can pay a lot of money for those other places. And we're going to give you the full recommendations from our team. Our hopes are that as you thumb through those recommendations, you're going to say, we're not really interested in this, and this doesn't fit where we're at. But maybe out of 30 recommendations, there's one that stands out to you, and the Holy Spirit inside of you says, yeah, this is a place where we can start. And then between Dave, yourself, as a pastor, leader in your church, and our ministry team, we're going to help you establish a strategic blueprint that says, how do we get from where we're at to where we're going? Because a lot of times when we're meeting with churches that are maybe a long ways off from building a new building, that doesn't mean that there's not a pathway forward. And again, man, if I can say anything about this group of guys, men and women that are in this room to work with you, we are ready and willing to go on the long haul journey with you and equip you in whatever season that you are in moving forward.